Hi and welcome to this webinar. I'm Leslie and this is my good friend Duncan, and we're going to talk to you about this particular webinar, which is going to allow you to assess penalties in the proper way and make sure that the races are safe and fair for the athletes.
So again, remember, failure to comply with the ITU competition rules may result in the athlete either being verbally warned, issued with a time penalty, disqualified, or worse still, suspended, and worse still from that, expelled. So remember, all your infringements and penalties are listed in the rulebook under the Appendix K. And remember, the TOs are allowed to assess penalties even if the infringement isn't listed in the rulebook. Okay, if you feel that an unfair advantage has been gained, or you believe there's a dangerous situation that's been created intentionally, then again, you're more than happy to issue a penalty.
And what we want to do is try not to issue penalties and get there ahead of time so that we can be as proactive as we can so that the athletes can compete on a level playing field without a lot of penalties being assessed by us being proactive. So often we'll be in a position to be able to give a verbal warning when an athlete's going to violate a rule unintentionally, or we believe that something is about to occur and that no advantage has been gained. So ideally, that's the situation that we want to find ourselves in.
Absolutely, we want to be as proactive as possible. Yeah, let's see if we can do everything we can to stop issuing a penalty.
Excellent. So we could give a warning by blowing our whistle and asking the athlete to stop if necessary for this particular infraction. They're going to be asked to modify their behavior, and we're going to allow them to continue racing.
So remember, it's not necessary for you to give a verbal warning, okay, especially before giving a more serious penalty. So a time penalty is appropriate for infringements which do not warrant a disqualification, okay? So if it's not a disqualification, we can still issue a time penalty. And the time penalties, they can be served in a number of designated areas. We have penalty boxes on both bike and run, depending on the type of event, whether it's draft legal or draft illegal. Or the penalties can be served in the transition area or towards the end of the run on the spot. There are two types of infringements. We have our drafting infringements. These are for infringements on the bike course. So we have 5 minutes in our long and middle distance events, 2 minutes penalty for our standard and distance events, and 1 minute in the sprint and shorter than sprint events. For any other infringement, it's a 1 minute penalty for our long distance events, 30 seconds for middle distance, 15 in the standard, and 10 seconds for sprint and anything shorter than the standard, sprint distance.
And Duncan and I cannot stress enough how important it is that the time penalty be given correctly for the particular distance of events. So what's so great about these webinars is you can take a picture or do a capture of this particular slide and just carry it around with you, especially for those weekends when there's a number of different distanced events going on at the same time, because you always want to be on top of it and make sure that you're giving the right time penalty. The other thing that you want to be clear on is that you're giving the penalty in the right place. So this particular chart is another good example of something that you might want to carry around with you, and it shows you based on the level of event where the penalty is going to be served for the different infractions. So you can take a look at that. What's really important is for our elite races, for the run penalty box, we need to give the athletes an opportunity to see the penalty on the penalty board and be able to decide whether they're going to serve that penalty on whatever lap of the run. So we actually have another chart, and this is going to be the last slide for this particular webinar. Don't be too disappointed because there's another webinar coming up. But this slide shows you that for the number of laps on the run, when that penalty has to be up on the board for it to be able to be assessed.
And the great training tools. Yeah, if you take them away with you on a phone or some backup on there, you know if your run's 1 lap or your run's 2 laps, when the penalties have to be up on the board. So again, there's nothing ashamed about taking that away with you. At the end of the day, we have a saying, it's better to measure twice and only cut things once.
Yeah, so if you aren't able to put the penalty up on the penalty board by the lap required, then you can't assess that penalty. So that's something to keep in consideration. So thank you very much for joining us for this particular webinar. We're going to talk more about penalties in an upcoming webinar, and we hope that you'll join us then.
See you then.